We are live now on our Facebook page.
हेलो।
सुधाकर जी,
हाँ, एक मिनट।
या
हाँ सर, सर स्टार्ट करें सर। सुप्रभात सभी श्रोतागणों का। मैं आज विद्या भारती उच्च शिक्षा संस्थान के इस वेबिनार, जिसका विषय है इम्पेटस टू क्वालिटी रिसर्च थ्रू नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन, इस विषय में मैं आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं। आज के हमारे वक्ता श्री प्रोफेसर वीके मल्होत्रा जी हमारे बीच हैं। आज के सेशन के मॉडरेटर श्री गौरव सुंदरम जी भी हैं, उनका परिचय मैं कराऊंगा, फिर वो सेशन को आगे बढ़ाएंगे। सबसे पहले मैं आप सभी से एक अनुरोध करता हूं कि कृपया सभी लोग इस सेशन के बीच म्यूट पर रहें, ताकि कार्यक्रम भी अच्छे से चल पाए और आप सभी इसका आनंद ले पाए। तो सभी से पहला अनुरोध कि कृपया म्यूट पर रखें। नमस्कार। एवं दूसरी जो महत्वपूर्ण इंस्ट्रक्शन है वो क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन से रिलेटेड है। सर पहले लगभग 30 मिनट तक बोलेंगे और उसके बाद आप सभी लोग अपना प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं। उसके लिए आप मुझे या जो मॉडरेटर है श्री गौरव सुंदरम जी, उनको चैट बॉक्स में आप प्रश्न लिखकर भेज सकते हैं। फिर मॉडरेटर आपका नाम लेंगे और उसके बाद अपना प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं, आपको उसका उत्तर मिल सकता है। हमारे यह कार्यक्रम माई एनईपी पेज पर लाइव है, लोग वहां से भी देख सकते हैं, वहां से भी हमारे साथ जुड़ रहे हैं। साथ ही साथ इसकी रिकॉर्डिंग भी हो रही है, जो हमारे वेबसाइट एवं यूट्यूब पेज पर अपलोड की जाएगी। इस सेशन का मुख्य पर्पस ट्रेनिंग के लिए है, और जो डाउट्स हैं लोगों के मन में, न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी अब बन चुकी है, आ चुकी है, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन से रिलेटेड जो प्रैक्टिकल व्यवहारिक समस्याएं हैं, लोगों के मन में डाउट्स है, वो डाउट्स क्लियर हो, लोग पूछ पाए और उन पर डिस्कशन करके आगे पॉलिसी के क्रियान्वयन की ओर हम बढ़ पाए, इस दिशा में ये प्रयास हमारी ओर से हो रहा है। तो सबसे पहले कार्यक्रम की सरस्वती वंदना करके हम सब शुरुआत करते हैं।
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता, सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा। शुक्लां ब्रह्मविचारसारपरमाम् आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनीं वीणापुस्तकधारिणीम् अभयदाम् जाड्यान्धकारापहाम्। हस्ते स्फाटिकमालिकां विदधतीं पद्मासने संस्थितां वन्दे तां परमेश्वरीं भगवतीं बुद्धिप्रदां शारदाम्।
नमस्कार। एक और परिचय है, विद्या भारती उच्च शिक्षा संस्थान के महासचिव माननीय नरेंद्र कुमार तनेजा जी भी हमारे बीच उपस्थित हैं इस कार्यक्रम में। बिना देरी करते हुए मैं आज के संचालक श्री गौरव सुंदरम जी का परिचय करा देता हूं। श्री गौरव सुंदरम जी अभी आईआईटी पटना से अपनी पीएचडी कर रहे हैं। गौरव सुंदरम जी लंबे समय से थिंक इंडिया के राष्ट्रीय संयोजक रहे हैं। गौरव सुंदरम जी साथ ही साथ एक सफल स्टूडेंट एक्टिविस्ट रहे हैं। कई सफल मुहिमों में 2011 के अन्ना आंदोलन के समय से ही एक्टिव रहे हैं और सही कॉजेस के लिए अपनी आवाज उठाते हैं। मूलतः बिहार से हैं। इसके अलावा एबीवीपी के सेंट्रल वर्किंग कमेटी एवं नेशनल एग्जीक्यूटिव कमेटी के भी सदस्य हैं। गौरव सुंदरम जी, आपका स्वागत है। कृपया आप
बहुत
कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ें।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सुधाकर जी। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, it's my great honor to you know welcome you all in this esteemed platform and the esteemed topic which we are going to discuss this whole session of 90 minutes. So first of all, I welcome our honorable speaker, Professor V.K. Malhotra sir, and all the members of uh, this movement of education. And there are many people who have been associated with, framing this national education policy since long. And now this has come to a dream coming into reality. And now we will be the torch bearers of implementing this national education policy uh, to different institutes, and the participation of everybody is required, since we know that wider consultations has been made to implement and to put this whole national education policy in front of public and in the whole public domain. And now that it has come to as a policy, so we'll discuss it in detail, and we'll also have an interactive session in which the topic which Sudhakar ji already discussed, that Impetus to National Research Foundation, is the topic of this whole session. And we'll have a very interactive session, and you can put the question in the chat box, and then we'll, after the speaker completes his speech, we'll take each of the question in the stipulated period of time. So before I begin this session, I would like to first of all introduce our speaker, and we are really honored to have Professor V.K. Malhotra sir with us. And Professor Virendra Kumar Malhotra sir is presently a member secretary, Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. Professor Malhotra is a professor of economics and has served CCS University Merit as professor as well as head, Department of Economics, coordinator admissions, examinations and evaluation, and as part of the team of dean students welfare. He has supervised thesis dissertations of 8 PhD scholars and more than 40 MPhil scholars. His research interests include governance and economic development, corporate governance, and performance of various industries, intellectual property rights, and India's concerns, foreign trade and investments, etc. He has done UGC-sponsored major research project on governance and development, a study of major states of India, and his own PhD work has been on economics of fertilizer subsidies. He has a number of papers in reputed national and international journals in areas of his interest. He has to his credit a book entitled Education, which is prescribed by many universities. He's on the board of Indian Council of World Affairs and a visitor's nominee to the court of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. He's also a member of the board of many renowned social science research institutes of the country, and is also part of the executive of many international research bodies and associations. So I welcome you, sir. So as we discussed that the topic is on the National Research Foundation. So I will briefly introduce the current scenario of our country that still after so many, when the 1968 education policy came into force, and there was so many recommendation which is still has not been made. So especially when we talk about higher education and research, so India has been lacking on many grounds. A very small data I would like to put, and that is that per 1 lakh researchers, uh, in India we have only 15 researchers, whereas you can find in US the number is 825, in China is 111, and in Israel is around 500. And most of the research is mainly concentrated on the STEAM institutes, central universities, and institutes like IIM, IITs, etc. And where the major chunk of our population, our students who are studying, the 93% of our student community are studying in the state universities. So the contribution of the research is very, very dismal, and a lot has been done to include and to accelerate the emphasize on the national research, and to get more patents filed, to get more publications. So all has been taken into consideration in this national education policy, and how an umbrella body like National Research Foundation can fund and also assess the, and also give uh, the credit to the researchers of this country, because the appreciation is very important. So all that has been taken into consideration after wider consultation. So now I would like to invite our honorable speaker, Professor V.K. Malhotra, sir, to please enlighten us on this particular topic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are right.
So, thanks to Gaurav first for giving my introduction, and my compliments to the organizers, Vidya Bharati Uच्च Shiksha Sansthan, which has taken this lead to organize uh, a series of webinars, a series of lectures on the very important aspect of the National Education Policy 2020. I see that the range includes almost 23 major topics around which the whole new education policy can be discussed. Before I start, my regards to Honorable Professor N. who happens to be the General Secretary of this highly academic body, and which is deeply involved in raising the standards of academics and research in the country. Uh, the entire team of organizers is definitely to be congratulated on this occasion. Before I make a formal beginning about the impetus to quality research through National Research Foundation under NEP 2020. We know, just to give you a little background before I start concentrating on the National Research Foundation and the research state of affairs in the country, and maybe when I try to compare it with the rest of the world, just few things to remind you what broadly NEP 2020 is all about. There is a lot of talk, and we know if we talk about the main features or the main objectives of this NEP, the few things that must come to our mind are it attempts to broad base the education in the country. That's one thing. And this NEP is definitely much more inclusive than in general the education policy we have had in the country. And an important feature of this NEP is that we are attempting to say that education, researches, publications, they have to be, and of course, education at the primary level has to be provided in the mother tongue. So it definitely is inclusive in this respect also, that it attempts to provide education and avenues of research in all possible languages of the country, especially which are provided in the constitution of the country. The different architectures of the different types of education that we keep talking in the country, be that primary education, secondary education, and higher education. And within higher education, of course, research is an important area. In all these spheres, this new education policy talks about a lot of reforms, in fact. The entire idea behind those reforms is broad basing, including a greater segment of the population, and also upgrading the quality of the education at different levels. Of course, over last 50, 60 years, ever since we started to talk about ourselves and we started to give to ourselves our own, our education has been one of the key, no doubt about. How could it be compared with the quality of education in the rest of the world? There has been an important debate in the country around that. I mean, does our quality of education compare well with the international standards? That's one thing. And secondly, uh, I mean, the skill sets that our education is right now providing, does it match or does it correspond well to the degrees and the diplomas that we are giving at the level of state universities, central universities, and maybe other organizations in the country? There can be some easy answers and understandings on this issue, of course, when we talk in terms of where do we stand as compared to the world and the international institutions. Of course, our concern has always been that among top 100, top 200, top 500, how many institutions of the country figure. Of course, 2, 3 institutions over last 2, 3 years have started to appear in top 200, but they are not more than 2 to 3 institutions of the country. And we all understand it, this entire discussion on improving the quality of research or giving impetus to the research in the country is definitely built around, because we know that assessment or evaluation of international institutions is done largely or significantly on the basis of two things. One is what is their research contribution or what is their contribution in knowledge creation. And second is where do their degree holders finally reach, or in what way they are employed in the world, they are seen in the world, and they are placed in the world. So these are two, and third parameter could be the level of infrastructure in an institution. So the most important parameter of assessing institution is around two things. One is the knowledge creation through researches that they have been in a position to do. And the second is their degree holders, where are they placed? So, and third important thing, as I wanted to highlight, was that if we conduct an analysis of that, do or have we been successful in providing the skills corresponding to the degrees that we are giving away to the students? There is a strong realization that we have a system in the country. For long, we had this realization. We have in the country a system which is not originally our own. You know, we term it as largely Macaulay's education policy. And we do say that the system that we had at the time of independence or even after independence it is largely foreign, borrowed, or largely imposed on us. So it has not evolved over time from our own thinking, from our own developments, from our own problems in mind. So that being one major shortcoming of what we have inherited as a system, the called education system or the research system that we had. And the unfortunate part is that this all, I mean, the system which is borrowed or imposed one on us to create create an elite class within the country was all accepted in the name of scientificism, which was imposed by the rulers that existed there, and perhaps with the belief or with an assumption in mind that ruler happens to be scientific and the ruled are unscientific. And the elite trained in Western system and the style is more scientific, and the indigenous system or style is less scientific. Uh, I know that when at international level we talk about and discuss all these things, there is a lot of discussion on, and most of the international agencies, they do talk in terms of educational diplomacy these days also. I will not be discussing that or delving upon that at length, and largely be concentrating on the research related dimension of the new education policy. And we all know and appreciate also that we have an aspirational India, and an aspirational India definitely intends to be one of the significant societies of the world in terms of knowledge creation. I'm not exactly trying to say the guru of the whole world, but definitely it aspires to be one of the gurus, or in my understanding, the guru is one who has the knowledge, who can create the knowledge, and who can disseminate that knowledge also. Let me start with the basic assumption of the ruler being scientific and the ruled being unscientific, the modern being more scientific, and the traditional and the ancient being less scientific, and also that Western system is more scientific and the indigenous system or style is less scientific. So I contested one on the ground that a society which has been uh, scientific even during ancient times and had the universities of high international acclaim and recognition like Takshila, Nalanda, Vallabhi, or Vikramshila, where scores or thousands of scholars used to come from the entire world and used to be trained, educated, and they used to acquire knowledge here. How could those society, which was 2000 or 3000 or 1000 years back, so scientific and was having an international recognition? I'm reminded of India's civilization, which is compared, there were 3, 4 civilizations which are compared with each other in terms of their ancient treasure of knowledge. And it is largely credited to India, Mesopotamia, Egypt, or Greece. And we know India's Harappan and Mohenjo-daro urban cities or urban civilizations, their development and advancements, and they are still talked about, they are still being studied. And I think the whole gamut of knowledge that these civilizations and these cities, their development patterns were seen to have, they are still not fully documented or studied. And apart from that, if I talk in terms of the kind of advancement that we had even in ancient times, in the area of metallurgy, somebody was making a mention about that in the beginning itself. Mathematics, I need not make a mention that Indians invented zero, decimal system, geometry, trigonometry, and whatnot. And a number of things are being still discovered every day that who happened to be the real discoverer of a particular theory, theorem, or a rule. Similarly, in healthcare also, in surgeries also, we know there are numerous cases, and there has been an Indian traditional system of healthcare also. There is no doubt about that, and Ayush is a big representative of the kind of health system we have had over centuries and centuries together. We did possess a good treasure of knowledge in the area of literature, understanding of grammar. And as I said, I mean, there is hardly any parallel in the world. If we talk about our architecture, if we look at our temples, old buildings, which have already seen thousands and thousands of years, and they have definitely withstood those uh, several disasters caused by nature also. And they have survived with that beauty, grace, and definitely the presentability before the world. The kind of music, art, literature, festival, costumes. I mean, this is all constitutes India's traditional wisdom, and which is all based on a very scientific understanding, knowledge, and good presentation skills, which got manifested in the kind of thing that I've just talked about. Uh, so all of this could definitely not only influence Indian society, but it influenced the whole of the world. We know that India's influence went to entire East and Far East area, and it went to the Central Asia also. And I'm told by the people that what we today term as Europe also, there also people understand that how India's language, literature, scientific advancements done in the ancient times have contributed towards building and understanding and maybe knowledge acquirement by those societies as well. So India definitely, as a result of its sheer wisdom and knowledge, went much, much beyond its own borders. So, and this is with, I mean, as a society, we have believed and practiced sustainable development, made efforts in intergenerational equity creation in terms of sustaining the natural resources and their endowment. We have also, to a large extent, followed the principle of distributive justice. Uh, we could, as I said, that our system could provide education to the best scholars of the world. No scholar in the world was said to have completed his understanding until one visited India, even in the ancient times. So we used to be termed as a seat of great learning. So on the basis of this, it could be easily said and found that we did not suffer from any problem of a lacking scientific temperament. Our society did possess a very good scientific temperament and scientific approach towards looking at the things and phenomena. Uh, so, I mean, during this limited period of time, it will not be in a position, I will not be in a position to talk about all those things, in fact. And one could not have even an iota of apprehension on the scientific approach of our society. The modern world has been witnessing very quick changes. We know the transformation shifts and paradigm shifts have been having a very high pace, and they have been changing at a very high rate. Uh, Today, no country can think of remaining completely away or aloof or insulated and static from the kind of changes which are taking place at the global level. Of course, we all understand that whether we talk of agriculture or industry or service or tertiary sector, everything finally depends on the degree of knowledge that a society is bestowed with, or a society attempts to create, attain. And this is why knowledge creation, attainment, they have become of critical importance, and they definitely help societies to not only grow, sustain, and uplift themselves. Of course, we understand that modern societies like US, UK, Germany, Japan, South Korea, France, and even in the modern times, China, they have become uh, somewhere, let's say, synonymous with the changes, the new changes, scientific approaches. And there has been a strong realization in the world that the advancement or the development, which was initially set to largely depend on the land related developments, then shifted to the labor related developments. And then we came out with a theory which talked in terms of capital contributing towards the development the most. But in the modern times, we have seen that it is the human capital which has become the real wealth of the world. And this is where the whole idea of research is to be emphasized. So each one of us understands it now, that requirement. We definitely need a very robust system of research in a country if we have to come to the degree of our aspirations. We have to be a performing nation. We have to fulfill the aspirations of the people. And we all understand that technology, as I said, the world is changing almost in every 6 months' time to 1 year's time to a phenomenal degree. Right. If I talk about new problems which stand before the world, for which the researchers everywhere in the world are trying to find a solution, these problems, the prominent one among them could be termed as the problem of climate change, water resources, uh, population dynamics, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analysis, violence, terrorism, health problems, clean drinking water, sanitation, energy production and consumption, communication, means of transportation, infrastructure, smart cities, vibrant villages, quality of education, skilling people, uh, old age, some of the new areas which are being talked about, they also include social biology, neuropsychology, legal economics, social healthcare, sociology of science, cybersecurity, and the recent discussion, especially in India and also in the world, ever since the nationalism within the framework of democracy is being talked about, the focus has definitely shifted to a large extent, as has been very well articulated by the Prime Minister of the country while talking about Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India. So these are the key issues which definitely need attention of the policy makers. And to me personally, no policy maker in any uh, advanced society of the world today can keep him or herself or themselves away from the latest developments in the researches. And this is where the complementarity between the policy making, academics, or the researchers has to exist in an advancing society. So all this requires a very deep understanding of science and technology. But along with that, we also need a deep understanding of the kind of issues that I've just tried to talk about. They all pertain to, or they all are about, a lot of interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, and NEP 2020 talks in terms of cross-disciplinarity. We know that all these researches have socio-cultural and environmental dimensions also. There can be, I mean, few years back, we used to have this idea that what is being developed as something new, or what is being discovered in the world, or what is being invented in the world, can be imported also. So importing of a discovery or invention or a research can be an idea where from a relatively less developed country could make a beginning. But the point is, as I said in the beginning itself, that India, since ancient times, has itself been a very scientific community. So this idea may have continued, or could have continued under an apprehensive situation for a certain period of time, but could not be made a perennial philosophy of the country. So our thrust has to be laid on that if in the entire world researches are taking place, let India increasingly contribute towards those researches and participate to a larger extent in those researches. I'll come to some statistics in a few minutes from now. So I would rather term it as that there has to be a sufficient degree of self-reliance in research also. Of course, we have to learn from each other at the country to country level also, but then others must have sufficient reasons to enter into such kind of collaborations with us. And until we ourselves happen to be a knowledge creator in the world will not be coming close to us as far as those collaborations in knowledge creations are concerned. So the basic questions with which I would like to initiate this discussion of Impetus is, where should we be spending our time? And how should we be deciding our issues of research? And what kind of investment and how expenditure on research is to be treated? We know that the best institutions of the world, whether MIT, Cambridge, Harvard, Oxford, or any other institution, as I said in the beginning also, they are rated on the basis of their contribution in the research and how does their output in terms of human resources find value in the market, being a very, very important question. And then what can be the role of researchers, scholars, innovations, etc., in making of the institutions? Obviously, institutions, even if we talk of the Indian institutions like IITs, Indian Institute of Science, we talk of the best ranked institutions, you'll notice that these are the researchers, scholars, and innovators. And institutional infrastructure, especially in terms of research itself, which definitely contributes to a significant extent in upgrading the ranking of an institution within the country also. And the institutions which have a strong culture of research, publication, discussions, international and national exposure, and which have been mentored by the best of the brains in the country, they finally constitute the best institutions, whether here in India or in the world. And this entire structure or architecture is said to be the ecosystem of or the institutional ecosystem which facilitates researchers. And we know, as spending is concerned, we know that there is a lot of discussion about how much does India spend on its researchers. We know that the US spends almost 2.8% of its GDP. Israel spends almost 4.3% of its GDP, and South Korea 4.2% of its GDP. Whereas India allocates 0.8% of GDP towards researches. In reality, the actual expenditure comes around 0.69 to 79%. I was looking at an international report also that if we talk about top countries, top 10 countries, jointly they are spending somewhere around $1,909 billion, uh, and their share in total R&D expenditure happens to be 79% of the whole world. And of course, the US used to be in the lead in 1959-60. And the global expenditure in 1959-60 was on R&D was just $12 billion. Whereas in 2020, it is expected to be 2.4 trillion US dollars. The share of US, which was in 1960, 69%, has got reduced now to 28%. The US own spending on researches has not got reduced. In terms of its GDP also, it is largely stagnating around, as I said, 2.8% to 3% of the GDP. There are a number of countries which have definitely increased a good part, or which have dedicated a good part of their GDP towards research and development. And if we talk about the overall expenditure at the global level, China is spending the most. Though of their GDP, the share on R&D happens to be 2.2% only. But in terms of billions, they are spending $553 billion on purchasing power parity basis annually towards research and development. And my figures are taken from 2018-19 statistics. The US on the whole is spending $511 billion on purchasing power parity. And as I said, that its share in terms of GDP is 2.8%. Japan is also significantly spending on R&D, and its expenditure on or investment on R&D is 165 to 166 billion dollars. But in terms of budget, it constitutes 3.2% of its budget. Germany again is spending nearly 3% of its GDP on R&D. South Korea, as I said, is spending much more than these economies, despite the fact it happens to be a small economy, but it is in towards it. As India is spending 66 US billion.
So there is some network issues at your end. Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay, okay. Is it okay?
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Right.
Yes, sir. It is
So
clear.
US is spending 27% of the total R&D expenditure of the world. Of the total global expenditure, nearly 22% is coming from China, 8% is coming from Japan, 5.5% is coming from Germany, of the total expenditure on R&D, nearly 3.9%. Of course, our share of GDP is far lesser, but if we talk in terms of the global share, it stands around 3.5 to 3.6%. So this is the background of the spending. But when I look at the per capita expenditure, our statistics is far below the international statistics. Just few things for our understanding. I tried to take notice of the figures that we were spending on research in 2005 and that we are spending now in 2019 or 2020. As I said, that nearly 0.69 to 0.7% of our total GDP is being spent on research now. And a good part of that, almost 0.3% of the GDP goes on the natural sciences and agricultural sciences, and 0.4% goes on engineering and technology related researches, and 0.05% goes on medical science related researches, which include health related researches. And if I talk about social sciences, only 0.024% of GDP is spent on policy and social science research. Now, this is an important issue, and it should be an important issue of concern for all of us. Before I start analyzing all these things, let me make a mention about that in 2010, as far as Scopus statistics is concerned, science and technology related publications were nearly 75,000. And social science research or policy research related contributions were 6,360. In 2015, the science and technology papers were 131,000, whereas social science related and policy related papers were 10,800. In 2019, science and technology publications are around 158,000, and social science related papers are 23,600. So over last 3 to 4 years or 4 years time, our publications in social science and policy domain have increased by more than 100%, whereas our science and technology publications have increased from 131,000 to 158,000. And in science and technology related publications, our ranking is said to be ranging between third and fourth, whereas in social science and policy domain, our ranking has got upgraded from 12th to 8th right now. But one issue is of major concern, which relates to two important aspects. One is the degree of innovation that we have, and second is the citation of our publications that we have. Our citations were much more 10 years on an average, were much more 10 or 9 years back than they are today. So it speaks about the quality of publication on the one hand, and it also reflects on that in new areas, that the kind of researches that we are doing, they do not pertain to the new areas on which the world is doing its share of the researches in the modern times. Because the general observation is that if you are picking up new areas for researchers, of course, there are greater chances that your work will be more cited than the merely working in the repetitive areas or the researches which have largely been done, and there is a lesser extent of the newer aspect to be looked into. So I think this is very important in India's case. Another thing is that on degree of innovation, despite the fact I said that we have third to fourth ranking on science and technology publications, and we have now 8th ranking in social science and policy related research. But when we talk of degree of innovations, I'm reading from the WIPO statistics, in fact, and our place on degree of innovation is 40th out of 53 countries. And on a scale of 100, our score on International IP Index is 38, whereas the US has got this score at 95, UK at 94, Germany at 91, and Japan at 90%. So it speaks about that conversion of our researches into new innovations, products which can actually go out in the market and can bring to the economy a good amount of resources, because all of us understand it very well that new researches can definitely create new kind of economic resources also, and perhaps uh, in the initial phases of researches, a certain degree of monopoly is also held by the economies which initially contribute towards those researches. So that being an important aspect. So per capita spending, as I said, is very low in India by all international standards. If we talk in terms of analyzing that what is our per capita spending on researches, we definitely constitute uh, a, let's say, poorly spending economy on researchers, to be fair uh, in our analysis towards it. But at the same time, I would like to focus on one more critical aspect. Despite the fact our spending on researchers has been uh, far lesser than the international standards, the productivity of that expenditure is another area where perhaps we need to have a deeper look and understanding. I'm reminded of that the few experts of Asian Development Bank, when they visited our office and we had a discussion on this aspect, they were trying to convey somewhere that all over the world, most of the international agencies and most of the societies which are spending, including China and United States, which are spending heavily on researchers these days, they do have a very robust system of analyzing the productivity of their expenditure on researchers. And India definitely, in this regard, suffers from two fundamental problems. One is that the expenditure is low. Uh, Per capita expenditure on research is low. In proportion of GDP also, it happens to be low. But at the same time, the productivity of expenditure is not being analyzed well. And as a result of that, researches happen to be quite repetitive in nature. And at agency level, at sponsoring agency level also, there is a lot of duplication. And limited avenues are being competed by the duplicating agencies, in fact. So this aspect, I think, needs a little deeper understanding, and that the task is definitely led to the agencies like National Research Foundation. Uh, this is why for a very long period of time, and this is why in the beginning I tried to enlist the problems also, because we know, on the one hand we have problems at hand, and there are a number of scores of problems. The range goes beyond 50-60 basic problems about which the whole country is worried now. That's one thing. And at the same time, limited research expenditures are being spent on repetitive areas where nothing new is going to come out from. So that being an important aspect of our worry, in fact, in terms of research and innovation. And as I said, if you look at India's statistics of publication, it shows a drastic improvement. Our share is increasing at the international level. Our growth rate is more than double of the international growth rate of the publications. But if you look in terms of the patents or innovations, our growth rate doesn't show a good sign. I think this is where a good conversion of researchers into good innovations and good patents needs to be done. And this is where a coordinated effort is very much required. Another important part is that, as I said, that I see and I analyze that there is low level of citation per paper at the international level as far as Indian publications are concerned. Another interesting part is that it is only in the recent past that there is a little intensification of our collaborative effort and our involvement with the international agency. For long 50, 60 years, perhaps our degree of collaboration and involvement with the international agencies and publishers was lagging behind the international standards. And as I said, the research gap, the gap that these the gap related to the coordination among various research funding agencies in the country, that needs to be bridged, in fact. And research has to be, there is a larger belief in the country that research is meant for those who have not got a secured employment in the country. So we need to understand this aspect very, very well, that research is a productive engagement, and it is not a mere stopgap arrangement till one gets a good employment revenue. So, and as I said, and it has to be seen and analyzed with the productivity of the institution, which must become a must. Uh, I should not be hesitating to say our institutions and institutional wastages, definitely, they have cost us a very heavy cost, taking a big chunk of our research spending also. And as I said, that there is low level of institutional collaboration. This is why the NEP 2020 talks about with emphasis on collaborative efforts. I know that people in science, technology, agriculture, mathematics, right, and people, let's say in social sciences, they do not come to a platform where we can discuss. If you talk to the policymakers of the country or the top order researchers of the country and ask them that what are the basic problems, what are the main research issues where all expenses of the researchers in the country have to be combined, I think will not get a very definite answer from them. So the degree of collaboration, living in their own silos, believing without substantial reasons or without sufficient reasons that whatever they are doing finally is not going to be taken by the entire society and is not going to solve the problems of the society until every expense of the research, every spectrum of research is fully involved. So what I'm trying to propose is that not only growth rate of publication, not only spending is important, but analysis, a fair analysis of productivity of that investment or spending is also important. And a conversion of uh, publications into innovations and problem solving orientation, they are the need of the hour. And I think it is with this background, or it is in this background, that the NEP has proposed to have National Research Foundation. Because, as I said, there is hardly any collaboration. There is hardly any interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity. For example, in this COVID-19, in the face of this COVID-19, the whole world has come to an understanding that mere infrastructure is not going to solve the problem. Mere existence of beds, doctors, medicines, that's not going to solve our problem. It needs much more coordinated effort. Society also has to practice certain good health and hygiene practices. We also understand that preventive healthcare is more important than the simple medication after one has got contracted the disease. So National Research Foundation definitely is proposed with an idea to transform the quality and the quantity of research. For me personally, the quantity today, because India has been in a fix of opting between quality and the quantity, it's high time that we come to a realization that quality has to be promoted, and based on that quality, the further scholarship has to be groomed, encouraged, and inspired in the country. that who do not take it as a stopgap arrangement, but research becomes the passion of the youth in the country. So that's very, very important. So discovery-based learning, critical thinking, and creative learning, these are being emphasized. And as I said, we have a very good pool of the youth. I was reading the International Talent Report also. There is every mention that India has got tremendous talent. There is hardly any big competition in the world where India has not, or an Indian has not performed to the best possible level. I'm reminded of several Olympiads also, and there is score sheets also. There is hardly any Olympiad where several Indians have not made to all 100 percentile. Right. So it stands out as an example that what kind of talent we have. But point is that perhaps we are not trying to tap this talent well, give to them the productive task that they must be taking forward. And that should finally be resulting into solving some national or some international problem. So not only, so the idea is we not only have a knowledge-based society, we also have a problem-solving society and orientation, that being the key thing. Uh, uh, I find number of traces of examples in this NEP that an important question is teaching and research the first or the topmost priority of those who have come to this expanse of knowledge? So this question must be raised. And as I said, that there has to be a sufficient degree of coordination among academics, policymakers, and I add one more thing, industrialists in the country. Because performers or sectors are performing entirely differently. There is a normal understanding in the country that one who is coming out of a university after taking a degree has to be trained afresh for the purpose of one's employment in an industry or in a service sector. So I think this is high time that not only academicians, not only researchers, but policymakers and also industrialists and the top leaders of the tertiary sector or even agricultural sector, they sit together, they discuss the priorities of the nation, and they decide that how youth in the country or coming generations in the country have to be trained for this ever changing world, and where the world is changing at a much faster pace than ever before. Uh, a very strong challenge is going to emerge in coming days in terms of implementation of Industry 4.0. I need not explain that in detail, but my understanding is that Industry 4.0 in India uh, may be ventured by the industries which do have state of the art technology or which have a good research and development understanding, or those who have those people as human resources who understand those dimensions very well. But if we talk of the lower down the order industry, I'm making a reference to MSME in particular. I think their understanding will have to be raised to, or their sensitization on this aspect will have to be raised to the adequate level before we expect lot many changes in fact to happen. Uh, People keep saying normally that there is a lot of scope for capacity building, not only pertaining to the students, but also pertaining to the faculty in the universities, in the research institutions. And there is a common observation that even research skills, methodology related skills, research writing related skills in the university system, in the research institutions, they have seen a decline, they have seen a deterioration, which needs to be definitely taken care of. I'm making a mention about few institutions, and that can definitely go down in our understanding of how a sufficient degree of coordination among institutions like DST, DBT, ICAR, ICMR, ICSR, ICPR, or ICHR is still to take place. And when I add to that, the policy making quarters of every ministry and every department of the ministry, you can understand the entire gamut of the problem and how it needs to be dealt with. So the coordination among various spectrums, as I said in the beginning, there is hardly any umbrella of the researchers in the country. If somebody is asked this question, a person from DBT or DST, a person from science, technology, social science, or humanities is asked that what are four priorities of the researchers in the country, I don't think we can reach a final answer on this question. So this is I think we need to describe, we need to identify, and we need to very well define our research roadmap for the country. Not only for now, countries have, US, for example, has its policy for 25 to 50 years. And despite changes in their president, it is said there this policy or that policy shall remain a constant. So when I say constant, that means within the framework of dynamism, it remains a constant. So, and the monopoly of the few has to be avoided. There has to be an approach where we identify the right scholars, the right resources, the right human resources, and the duplication, repetitiveness is avoided. And making policy makers, uh, I think that point I'm going to make next is very important. Policy making in the country is not much aware about the latest developments in the world and the latest researches in the world. And this is where the sensitization of the policy makers in the country must take place, I think. Uh, we must have a framework like National Research Foundation, which does not talk about the breakthroughs, but which causes breakthroughs itself. And the whole idea is that the world, as I said, is changing. The entire dynamics in the world is changing. Of course, as I said, in the initial years of a knowledge creating society, the initial years are supposed to be providing a society the monopoly benefits. That advantage of that has to be reaped by a society. And a society which is said to have 2,000, 3,000, or 5,000 years of existence as a scientific society. I think why this is a strong point, that why are not, or why have we not moved in last 100, 60, 70, or 300 years? So it's an important point. We have missed many buses. We hardly have a time to miss any bus any further in future. So I think it's a strong initiative in the form of, it's a very good proposal to have National Research Foundation, where there will be a coordinated effort. There can be an umbrella organization. Objectives can be broadly defined, but what is that we need to, since we are talking about giving impetus, we must give impetus to implementation of that also. And let me be very candid on that. The institutions which have failed to perform in the country, they need to be revisited. They need to be analyzed. And since new institutions are coming, so we must understand that how a system of new entry and new exit, a system of new entries and new exit must be brought in place. So there has to be focus on that. With these words, I would definitely thank the organizers once again. And I hope that this entire initiative is taken further. And with the support of an organization like Vidya Bharati, the move towards giving impetus to the quality research in the nation definitely gains currency and gains momentum in coming days. With these words, thanks to all of you.
Thank you so very much, sir. It was indeed a very thought-provoking, illuminating experience to all the people who are present in this live session and our different social media. And indeed, it was a very great learning experience for me also as a research scholar. And like you talked about the several parts of research and how the citations and all those repetitiveness is not required. So, and how we can give a real impetus to research in our country, and how we can, break the silos in the different countries which we are living, and come together with a multidisciplinary approach. So I really, really thank you, Professor Vilendra.
Thank you. Thank you.
In this introduction, we have with us, we have with us Professor G, National Bharati Uच्च Shiksha Sansthan. So, welcome, Professor Kailash. Now, we have very limited time, so we will take up only a few questions.
Okay.
So, one question has come from Ms. Kriti. So, please, Kriti, unmute yourself and ask your question. Kriti, are you
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
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 please.
yeah. Good morning, sir, first of all. And it was such an amazing session which we now attending. So, sir, my question to you is it considering as a vocational training like we when we are kids or we have such an enthusiastic or energetic minds? So, as we are starting after the concept of educational policy, so after we are starting that, we can go with the research period also from the school times, like we are starting our vocational training for our school times. So it is related to that, like as you use the word scientific temperament,
Mhm.
so it's like reality check or a physical reality, so we can relate it with that.
Mhm. Uh, Kriti, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, sir, yeah, you
Okay,
are.
okay. So, Kriti's scientific temperament and professionalism or vocationalism, they go together.
Yeah.
Right? We need to understand. Sometimes it does happen, and everywhere I feel that within our own society, for example, sometimes it is seen that India being uh, much away from the West, if India takes up in coming days the to professionalism or higher degree of professionalism, perhaps India will not be a, keeping intact its own value system. That's a big divide that we are faced with. But my understanding is that there are a number of countries in East Asia itself. For example, Japan. Right. Japan has definitely maintained a very high degree of their own value system. And at the same time, they have maintained a very high degree of professionalism and vocational training also. So we have an example of a society before us. Korea is another society. Taiwan from Asia is could be third example before us. So we need to learn from all that. And we should not be seeing things with self-doubt, in fact, that if we grow, perhaps we are trying to say, if we grow in that dimension, we will perhaps be compromising our value system. That's not the kind of situation that I perceive. So I think if researches improve in the country, the fundamental educational system in the country and the system of training in the country would also show an improvement. Right now, we do not, especially the education in the country. I would place my emphasis on one word, one key word, and is that the entire uh, faculty in the country, the teaching community of the country, must have a great degree of accountability, and they must definitely own that accountability themselves. And this is when there would hardly be any differences, because for me, vocational training is just one aspect of the total training. Right. So that aspect can be taken care of. And this is perhaps one reason that despite the fact repeatedly talking about our value system, perhaps we have seen a deterioration even in our value system also. So accountability shall be a key word that the faculty in the country has to definitely NDR. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kriti. Now, next question from Lal Krishna ji. Yeah, please ask your question. Are you there, Lal Krishna ji? Uh, okay, sir. I have a small question. Since we discussed that this policy has also focused on the multilingual approach, and
That's
one
right.
very important, fact is that since diverse country belonging to different diverse backgrounds and different mother languages, so there's a very discussion that we'll having the medium of education and even in research, uh, the things at the level of mother tongue. So how you are finding this challenge of this um, bringing our students, because most of the literature available is in English. So how it would be difficult for our researchers who have that knack but are unable to cope up with the international scenario because of less adaptability to the English language.
Uh, Gaurav, there are two things which have to be understood very, very well. One is that, uh, see, uh, in India, we need to understand that a good part of the population has been deprived of good education and understanding because the fact that we have imposed a definite medium on them. So that's one thing. So I think it has been established by researchers that in the initial years, if our training is done, it can be in other languages, but primarily in mother tongue.
Sir, your
Then,
network is
of course,
perhaps weak.
am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. So if that training in the initial years of one's life is done in one's own language, I think one can definitely comprehend the things much better. That's one thing. Secondly, I think there are a number of countries. Uh, if you take their example, even in Europe, you know, barring England, there are most of the countries which know more than, on an average, 3 languages. Barring England, most of the countries know more than 3 languages. The average is 2.6 or 2.7 languages on the whole. Secondly, if you talk of entire, do you think Japanese are that good as Indians are in English? The answer is no. Or Koreans are that good in English as Indians are? Right. The answer is again no. Or Iranians are that good in English as Indians are? Or Chinese are that good in English as Indians are? The answer is no. So we have to understand. And secondly, I think we need to have an infrastructure in place. Infrastructure like that there can be good facilities of translators in the country who can definitely convert good research works into an internationally acceptable language or internationally accepted medium. We are thinking in that direction, but point is, uh, on several counts, as I said, that as a word of caution, we need to be a much more dynamic society than we have ever been. Perhaps our acceptance of change or our degree of change has to be much greater than what it is now. So I remember long back, there was a World Bank report on India's preparedness towards change. We do not constitute a society which is said to be much prepared for changes. Right. So, uh, cherishing our ancient system, ancient wisdom, and knowledge should not be a reason that we stagnate. It should be a reason to move further. It is our strength, it is our treasure. So, I think we can create an infrastructure in terms of translation, or we can definitely have people or institutions where good translations can be done. and they can be taken for the international publication, and that can support us very well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very
Thank
much.
you.
Sudhakar, you have a question? Sudhakar ji, yeah.
नमस्ते सर।
नमस्ते।
सर आपने अपने रिसर्च में भी ये बिंदु रखा कि ओरिजिनलिटी और प्लेजरिज्म या कॉपी इस प्रकार के इशू ना हो। तो सर एक प्लेजरिज्म तो एक इशू हुआ, सेकंड एक इशू ये है सर कि जैसे कई बार जो सब्जेक्टिविटी ऑफ द रिसर्चर है, जैसे पहले से माइंड में होता है कि यही रिजल्ट है, इस बिंदु में यही होता है, एंड देन वो वैसे पॉइंट्स ढूंढते हैं या वैसे ही रेस्पॉन्डेंट ढूंढते हैं कि उनको वही रिजल्ट मिल जाए। तो सर ऐसा एक मोटिवेटेड रिसर्च होना या जो हमारी सब्जेक्टिविटी से रिसर्च का लॉस होना, ये माइंडसेट कैसे चेंज हो सकता है सर? ये जानबूझ के भी होता है या गलती से भी हो सकता है, बट देन रिसर्च सफर्स बिकॉज ऑफ दिस।
Sudhakar ji, should I be responding to that in Hindi or English?
As you feel comfortable, sir.
Okay, okay. Fine. See, there are two things. You said that motivated research and original research. I think the whole question is around this. See, in researches, you will notice, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, okay. So what we have noticed is that issues of a particular time, they definitely take priority in research subjects. That's one thing. Secondly, most of the people definitely follow their fellow trainers, their mentors also, in terms of their choice of research subjects. That's one thing, and this is where originality suffers also. Thirdly, the researchers have to have two things at the same time. They are supposed to be trained for two things. One is scientific approach, and second is creativity also. If these two things are, they are trained well in these two things. And third, the major thing in which a researcher is supposed to be trained is the presentation or the linguistic skills, where one can present one's researches or findings before their own community, before the whole world. I think these three things are combined in one or one's training. One can definitely contribute towards original research. That's one thing. And I agree with you that since our orientation for a very long period of time has not been problem solving, has been around very limited problem, fragmentation of the society in one way or the other. This is where from the motivated researchers have definitely come into existence. I think the moment we are trained and our focus shifts to problem solving, because societies are faced with new problems every day. So they would need a new solution in terms of researches, and they would need a new understanding in terms of researches also. So this is what would definitely reduce the extent of pre-decided thinking or pre-decided findings or interpretations in researches, and that would reduce the degree of motivation. This is why I say that those who have a problem-solving aptitude, orientation, they should definitely be the real mentors, even in, not to talk of science and technology researchers alone, but even in social science and policy researchers. Because how poverty, inequality is to be viewed, how it used to be viewed 20, 30, 40 years. I keep telling my friends also that welfare, inclusion in the phenomenon, that is appreciated by all kinds of thinking these days. So nobody is an exception to that kind of a thinking. So unemployment is an issue before the nation. It is there for all. So a definite kind of people or people trained in a particular way will deal with this problem is not the kind of thing that can be accepted as an objective thinking, in fact. So the element of motivation in researchers has to be reduced, but it would finally depend on who our trainers and the mentors are, what kind of originality, creativity, methodological skills and linguistic skills do they possess. And it is largely on account of the fact, as I said in the beginning also, on account of the fact that we do repetitive researches. The kind of papers that we read, we feel that only this can be published. So I think we have to come out of that thinking. If we create something new that has got, or if it relates to problem solving, for example, there are few things. I've seen in the last few years that in the area of health, the citations are pretty good. So somebody who's publishing in that area, so will definitely get a good number of citations. This is how our skills have to be developed.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sudhakar ji. Lal Krishna ji, are you there?
Sir, I have a question.
Right.
Yeah, please, yeah. Very brief.
Sir, thank you so very much for your enlightening session. Sir, my question is related to the researchers who are doing the research in the native villages and are not getting so much attention and not aware about the international patent laws and the international all the literatures are there in English languages and other languages. So how should we cope up with that?
See, you are talking about the availability of infrastructure or their own exposure to the whole world?
Sir, their own exposure to the whole world. Can you brief about both of the things, sir?
Okay. See, point is, one is that, as I said, that being in village, being in big cities, it makes a difference to some extent. But if you look at the best talent in the country, even if we talk of Professor Kalam also, or the scientist Kalam, you know his background also, where from he has risen to that level. So I do not intend to say that it should not be used an excuse of underperformance. Right, that's one thing. If you look at most of the people, you talk of those who have contributed immensely in new inventions or discoveries at the top level in India or even in the world. I'm sure most of them have come from very modest backgrounds, including village background. Right. The point is our urge to learn, our urge to understand, our urge to be trained, and who are our real gurus, who are our teachers, who are our trainers. Right. I think. And today the world is so simple that even if you are sitting in a remote village, you want any data, you want any literature, it is available just at the click of a button. And in social science domain, and even where you need some data, you just let me know at ICSSR. Our NASDOC can take care of that, and you'll get our response within 24 hours. So this is what we can try to do, and we can build such infrastructure. And I think I keep talking to the policymakers, and I keep telling them also the earlier system of national laboratories of training the science and technology related manpower or researchers in the country, even in the remote areas, was a very strong tool, and it needs to be utilized in that way. And this is how our local, see, Prime Minister has already talked about from local to global. It is not from global to local. So we need to understand that who is to be leveraged. The local is to be leveraged to the global extent. The point is very, very clear. I said the talent exists everywhere. The intellect exists everywhere. The only thing is that we need to encourage it, inspire it, and definitely expose it slightly to the all possible levels. And I think there, not only the policymakers and the facilitators and the institutions have to work, but scholars themselves definitely take the courage to come out and understand the real issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's so many questions which are propping up, but we have a boundage of time, limitation of time. So I would like to just conclude this whole session. And before that, I again would like to thank Honorable Professor V.K. Malhotra, sir, to take out his very precious time for us. And we are really, really honored, and it was a great learning experience from you, sir. So I again thank you. I thank you all the researchers, professors who are continuously, engaged with this session. So, any concluding remarks from your side?
Just one thing that we suffer from the phenomenon of waiting for the things. There is hardly any scope in the world to wait for the things to happen. I have been arguing with the people that even despite pandemic, the financial stress that the whole country is facing right now, there are many things which can be done without further need or involvement of the increased funding. At least that should be done. We should not be constituting an indecisive society. It is high time that we do not waste time and we move on the path of being very decisive and deciding in a very objective and transparent manner. That's one thing. And secondly, as a society, we should definitely try to endear the quality, the transparency, and the innovative aspect. Because that and that alone, if we talk of India, that India which can be one of the major knowledge creators of the world, I'm not making a tall claim like that India being Vishwaguru in the first instance itself, because that will take time. Right, let us be first knowledge attainers of high quality first, and this attainment of knowledge definitely put us on the path of knowledge creator in a big way. But we need to be a very sincere society. We need to have concerted and coordinated efforts. Perhaps this is what we have been missing for long 60, 70 years. Mere rhetoric, mere that tomorrow will be placed like this is not going to work for us. So we have to start working in that direction. And I'm very, very clear in my mind that resources are no constraint for a performing society. So we shall definitely continue to perform despite stresses of various natures.
Thank you. My father once told me that the result which you will get is a 1% inspiration and 99. So the very hard work is required to, and all the stakeholders must come forward to bring this education policy into practice. So I again thank you so very much, sir, and over to you, Sudhakar.
Thank you.
So it was a very truly enlightening session today, I think. Sir actually started from ancient times. Sir told about all of the successful experiments, innovations, and all of the inventions and discoveries that have been contributed by our culture. Then he directly came to the modern, and then he also talked about the world scenario, also talked about Indian scenario. So this truly shows that how much you are invested and how much knowledge you carry about this field, sir. So, and then you also took questions after that. So firstly, I would like to thank you for taking out our invitation, for saying yes to it. And then I think enlightening the audience, and even after this session, all the people who will see the video, I think they will have something to learn at least from this. After the secondly, I'll thank Shri Gaurav Sundaramji, who agreed to moderate the session, and you did it beautifully. I also thank Professor Kailash Sharma, our president, and Professor Narendra Kumar Taneja ji, our general secretary, for attending this session. Your leadership is very critical for us to do our work, and the vision that you carry, we are just being a part to fulfill that. And you all find time to attend the webinars. That is a big motivational thing for all of us students here. And then at last, I would like to thank Manni Prakash ji and Manni Raghunandan ji, National Organizing Secretary and National Joint Organizing Secretary of Vidya Bharati Uच्च Shiksha Sansthan, respectively, under whose vision and mission we all are working here at this office. And then at last, I am also going to thank the audience. I think at one point of time, we were around 50-55 in this session. So we were not expecting it. We expect most of the audience on Facebook only. Here we just want to have a limited people so that everybody can ask questions. So, but then still we are getting very good response. So thanks to the audience that they are taking time out for our webinars. And I'll request all the people to visit mynep.in. That is our website. You can see all the webinars there. You can see all the suggestions that we are putting up there. We are also sharing some small concepts, PPTs about new education policy over there. You can also send your suggestions to us through that portal. After some time, that facility will also be there. So, and any other information of any work that will be done by Vidya Bharati will be updated there as well. So thank you to the audience. And with this, I announce the end of today's webinar. Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.